This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1641, the CGS Best of 2016 Nominations Show.
Laser beams, opinions like the seasons on everything you read in comics, movies, games, toys, artists, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek, uniting the world's mightiest heroes. This is...
I'm Brian Chrisman.
I'm Adam Murdo.
And I'm Chris Eberly.
And welcome to the show.
Oh, boy. You should have seen, Chris, those Eberly hips shaking.
Oh, no. That's one thing.
So arrhythmical.
I can do without there. Thank you very much. All right. So this episode is going to be, as Adam so eloquently mentioned, our nomination episode for the best of CGS for 2016. This has been a tradition for how long did Peter Rios got this started for us way back when?
Oh, yeah, pretty early. Let's go dating back to at least like the first 2 years of the show, okay. I think.
I should have done my research on this and had the answers in front of me here.
That's quite all right.
But I want to thank you, Adam, for keeping the mantle going for this, because that's too much work for me and just too much stuff. And
oh, yes, stuff is hard. But it was my pleasure, though, my friends. I mean, I look forward to this actually all year. Just an opportunity to give some recognition to the comics that gave us joy during the year, and just to give our listeners a chance to, just to talk back to us about what they've been enjoying all year, as we've been doing to them over the podcast.
Yes.
For that same amount of time. So this is more than any other time of the year. I think a collaboration between listener and host of Comic Geek Speak.
Excellent.
And it's a high point of the podcasting year for me.
Oh, very good. All right, well, before we get into the festivities, we want to give a word from our sponsor. This episode of Comic Geek Speak is brought to you by superherostuff.com. You can go to for all of your superhero stuff. All right, that delay's just got to stop. We'll think of like
he was making martial arts gestures over the camera. It was like a lip syncing. It was a poorly dubbed Hong Kong version.
We'll need more tinfoil and string
of superhero stuff.
All right.
Well, this movie was a grow up with on the USA Network in the 80s. Fantastic.
Well, anyway, so superhero stuff we can go to for all of your geeky shopping needs, whether it's for T-shirts, hats, hoodies, PJs and undies, belts, accessories, anything, you name it, whether it's comic books, sci-fi, TV, pop culture. They seem to have something for every person out there. They always have great sales. Like actually, as we record this, it's close to Valentine's Day, so we have a Valentine's Day sale going on. But they also have other sales going on throughout the year, throughout every season. So check out their website for updates on special promotions. And they always have new items coming into them. Right now they have all kinds of superhero socks. I'm looking at Aquaman socks, some Captain America socks. Oh, God. Fantastic stuff. They all now have in stock the Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Funko, Pop bobblehead, because, of course, they got all the Funkos. They've got all kinds of crazy hats, T-shirts. Because you have all the movies coming up this year. You've got, I guess, Logan is the next big superhero movie that's coming out.
Yep, advertising is ramping up right now.
We've got Guardians of the Galaxy 2 coming out. So all kinds of merchandise. Check them out. Superherostuff.com. You can go to for all of your
superhero stuff.
Okay.
And if you're buying more than $55 worth of stuff right now, enter the code XMEN17 and you get a free X-Men T-shirt.
Ooh, excellent. But again, check their website for their deals do change often. All right. Well, as Adam mentioned, this is our nomination show. So, Adam, the floor is yours for right now. Walk us through what is going to be in this episode.
Okay. Well, we accepted nominations from the listeners far and wide for their favorites in the year 2016. Cover dated March to March, since that's That corresponds to January.
Yeah, or whenever they shipped from Diamond.
Yeah.
in
There's
2016.
more ship date than cover date.
Correct.
But we asked for nominations in 16 different categories: Best New Hero or Hero Team, Best New Villain or Villain Team, Best New Comic, Best Limited Series, Best Single Issue or One Shot, returning to the slate of categories for the first time in a while, Best Cliffhanger or Moment, Best Storyline within a series or across multiple series, Best Best Sleeper or Surprise Hit, Best Ongoing Comic, not necessarily a new one beginning in 2016, Best Graphic Album, that can be either an original graphic novel or a trade paperback or hardcover, a collection, Best Writer, Best Artist, Best Writer-Artist, which is one person who does both, Best Color Artist, Best Letterer, and Breakthrough Talent of 2016. And the listeners responded in force. It's a pretty good turnout again
Terrific.
this year. We actually exceeded last year by about 6 ballots.
Oh, fantastic.
And so I've collated the results. I have here on this tiny little laptop before me, on a spreadsheet, all the several of the top nominee getters from the listeners. And so that's all prepared. And depending on whether or not one of us geeks...
You mentioned how the nominations get started, because each one... Well,
Right. First, each one of the three of us will surrender his nominee for each category. And then I will go to the listeners' ballots, and I will reveal the listener's choice. And if one of us has already nominated the listener's top choice by popular vote, I will then turn to the second highest getter of votes in that category, and that will become the listener's nominee.
Okay. So the idea is there will be 4 nominees in each
At
category.
At least. In case of a tie, sometimes there will be more than that.
Going for it. And this is my first time taking part in this in quite a while, because I felt for the longest time I just wasn't reading enough comics to make a good enough selection. But I hunkered down, and I actually got 13 of the 16 categories. At least I got some nominee in there. And again, my field of comics reading is somewhat narrow. So that's why I look forward to Adam and Chris's view, as well as the listeners, because they always come up with some great nominations.
Yep, that's another reason to look forward to this every year.
So I have a feeling this is going to be sort of like our spotlight episodes we do, where I'll be listening and all of a sudden, oh my God, I have to be reading this. I got to go home and find this and get a copy of this and read this right away. So it helps me get jazzed back into comics. But this was it felt a little bit like work, so I was like, but it was still fun going through and finding some things that I'd forgotten from 2016 and, giving them their props. So I'm happy to take part.
And Britches, if I may say, first of all, the fact that you used the term jazz just put steam in my strides. And number 2, we are honored and awed by your august personage joining us here for this.
Stop it!
Oye.
Oh, my God. I'm just a man with a dream. All right. So how do you want to work this, Murd? 3 of us here.
Well, the first category is Best New Hero or Hero Team.
Okay.
First appeared in 2016. So we will just sort of... Do we want to rotate it?
Well, it's your baby.
Okay. Well, actually, I think I kind of prefer to go last each time, because I'm controlling the slate here.
Okay.
And I want to be able to make sure that I'm not... never mind. This is fluid, folks.
It sure is. As you can see, no preparation whatsoever.
There is preparation. I've done plenty of preparation.
Well, I mean,
just,
for the rest of us.
just not on methodology. Once the time comes to, once we get around to actually,
You were focused on your task, laser sharp.
yes, to the exclusion of other tasks. But it doesn't matter. The order is strictly arbitrary. Do we want to take turns? Do we all want to do it in the same order every time, or do we want to?
What do you think, Chris?
Let's go pants me murd. How about that?
All right. Oh, so I got to be the first one here then. Okay.
That's the word from the man in the high tower.
Okay. All right. So then I guess starting with Best New Hero or Hero Team to debut in 2016. So we'll all give our nomination, then briefly speak about them, I guess.
Yes.
And I should probably mention, and I don't know if you did already. If you did, forgive me, that there may be some spoilers for things. We'll try to tiptoe around as best we can. But there will be some spoilers for some cliffhanger moment, I'm sure, some things. So,
right. So if you're a few months behind in your reading,
or a year,
or several,
that's a good point, Pants. Because my best moment is a huge spoiler if someone's behind on that particular title.
Okay.
So I'll warn people ahead of time.
Okay. So yes, forewarned is forearmed, as I love to say. All right. So again, Best New Hero or Hero Team that debut in 2016. My nominee is Superwoman. Hello, Chris. Aren't you next?
Oh yes, I'm sorry. I was mesmerized by Murd being so gleefully typing there. My best new hero team is the, shall we say, the Fall from Grace Golden Age team from the comic Black Hammer.
Aha. Whom I have dubbed, unofficially, of course, in my notes here, the Spiral City 7.
Excellent.
So I shall type that in there. And that was originally to have been my choice, but I'm going in a different direction now. And I'm choosing Sugar and Spike.
Fantastic choice, Murd.
Oh. Yeah, you'll be hearing from them later from me as well, but that's a great... I never thought of doing it for that. Oh, and do we have a listener's nominee?
Oh, of course we do. But I'll tell you. Well, I'll tell you what it is.
Well, I hope you will.
Yeah. Well, the way I sort of envisioned doing this was that each of us would reveal his own nominee and then talk about it.
Oh, sure.
And then at the end of the three of ours, we would then announce.
All right, because folks are scoring at home,
No, of course.
Playing along at home.
You can't have them filling out their scorecard, incorrectly.
Okay.
So yeah, actually the winner. We didn't step on any toes here. The winner for the listeners was the new Champions team. By Wade and Ramos.
Excellent. Okay, that's... I forget who's on the team.
Well, we got the Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel, the Sam Alexander Nova,
right.
Amadeus Cho Hulk, Viv Vision.
Oh, that's right.
It's a team of young heroes.
Okay.
Some of whom actually quit the Avengers to strike out on their own after some of the unpleasantness that happened during Civil War II.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I went with Superwoman. Again, I haven't read too many books. I have a new hero that stuck to my mind, but she sure did, especially because in her book, it went one direction we thought it was going to go, and then it went another direction with the hero, and it's like, okay. So I'm not even sure I should even mention who the Superwoman is for fear of spoiling that. But I just Phil Jimenez written and drawing the first couple issues. Really cool stuff. And yeah, the story's still going on as this episode is being recorded. It hasn't quite finished the first arc yet. So yeah, I enjoyed it, and I thought, that's it. That's my new hero. So Superwoman gets my nominee.
Yep. Could even qualify as a team.
Okay, that's true. Well, yeah, I'm covered either way.
Well, good choice.
Thank you.
I chose Black Hammer, the Dark Horse series by Jeff Lemire. I have to admit this, and I'm ashamed to say it's the first Jeff Lemire comic I've ever read.
Ooh, wow.
And I certainly am going to read a lot of his work now since then, because this comic has completely floored me. It's one of the first books I read whenever it comes out in a particular week. And again, he's taking a reverential sort of take on Golden Age style heroes, but heroes who have very much, for a variety of reasons that are still unfolding in this riveting story, have fallen from grace and are essentially living in hiding in various states of despair or isolation. And just how he examines the histories of these heroes, what happened to them, how they got there, how it's affected the dynamic of their team and their relationships. It's definitely one of the top comics that came out in 2016 without question. As I mentioned in previous episodes, as we discussed our awards show, this is, and I mean this in the best possible way, this was a tough year for me to pick stuff out because there were so many great books and concepts that were on the stands in 2016 that I just was trying to spread out my love because so many amazing titles. But definitely when I thought of a new team of hero, this was a no-brainer. This came to me right away. And if you're a fan of Lemire, a fan of sort of revisiting the Golden Age, but looking at it from more of like the Sword and Underbelly, a la like Sandman Mystery Theater, this is a book you should be reading. Black Hammer from Dark Horse.
Yes. A very good choice, Chris.
Thank you, my friend.
Yep, it was. Well, as I said, it might have been. I've got like a second and third choices galore written down on this page.
Show
so
off.
I got backups to my backups here. I came to play tonight.
Oh
all right?
my goodness! So, yeah, you're giddy as all heck. I'm gonna have to back away a little while.
But I absolutely concur with the praise for Black Hammer. I mean, it's a team of great archetypal characters from the Golden Age of comics, shut away in this Sartrean existentialist wasteland disguised as a sleepy little farm town. Meanwhile, life goes on in their old home of Spiral City without them, and it's what happens when representatives of classic comic genres are shut away with too much time on their hands for a good long span. And yes, just interesting mix of volatile personalities, and it makes for a fine, fine read. And now, as for my own nomination, this is the Sugar and Spike team of investigators specializing in superhero-related cases, as seen in the DC anthology miniseries Legends of Tomorrow, brought to us by writer Keith Giffen and the artist Bilkis Eveli. And it's the classic DC Comics Silver Age kids humor comic about adorable little pre-verbal toddlers named Cecil Spike Wilson and Sugar Plum, and they used to play together and have funny little adventures. But this is the grown-up 20-something Sugar and Spike, and they've grown up. They're still living in they're sharing a duplex, so they're still neighbors even after all this time. And they're private eyes. They're out there solving some of the most embarrassing and sensitive cases of superhero history. So every one of the 6 Sugar and Spike stories, this creative team did for Legends of it is Legends of Tomorrow.
Legends of Tomorrow is correct.
Yes.
It's directly based on an old classic DC Silver Age comic story. So you've got Batman hiring the duo to retrieve his embarrassing alternate costumes, like the zebra Batman and the rainbow Batman from Killer Moth. You've got something involving Mr. Monster from an old Kanigher-written Wonder Woman story. And so these characters are exploring the sordid underbelly of the Silver Age of DC Comics. It's all played for laughs. It's extremely caustic humor, which is what Keith Giffen does so well. And the characters, the poor, long-suffering, easygoing Spike getting pushed around by Sugar, who is the brains of the operation, and so the interplay between the two of them is a little, it's a little mean-spirited at times, but the chemistry between them is undeniable. And the adventures that they have together are very much fun. So I wanted to hopefully include that strip in these nominations somewhere. And you've let slip, Brian, that we may see these something to do with this particular feature elsewhere?
Yes.
Okay. But so there you are. My nominee is Sugar and Spike.
And Mert, I want to second your nomination. I want to mention again to the listeners, that whole story is out now in a softcover trade. If you love the Silver Age, if you love DC history, if you share Keith Giffen's sense of humor, get this book immediately, because it was one of the most entertaining reads of the year without question. With a little bit of pathos in there too, by the way.
Oh, yes.
It's good stuff.
So let's see. Other things that the listeners, well, we've said that the champions, that new team of young heroes that Mark Waid and Humberto Ramos put together, they are the winner of the listeners' nomination. The second highest vote getter was actually the characters from Black Hammer. So they're on our wavelength there as well. Third place was the new team of Bat Heroes from the Detective Comics run of Rebirth. Batwoman, Clayface, Spoiler, and so forth. The other people that got some votes, the Unstoppable Wasp got a couple, Mosaic, a new Marvel character, Superwoman got 1 or 2 listener nominations as well, Casey Brink from the new Doom Patrol, the new Superman, and Blind Spot, and of course assorted others scattershot.
Okay. All right, so next up then will be Best New Villain or Villain Team to be in 2016. My nominee is Godspeed from Flash.
My nominee is the protagonist from the comic book Killer Be Killed, Dylan.
Mine is Ultra Woman and her army of bizarruses. Superwoman.
Okay. Yeah, God help me. I love speedster villains. Flash's rogues gallery. He's got a new rogue in the post rebirth era, I guess, for DC. We're calling it now. And again, it's just another speedster, sort of on the lines of Professor Zoom, who's there to just taunt Barry. And again, with my limited reading, I just said, well, this villain just stuck out with me. I can't really just give too much more than that without spoiling a couple of things, but yeah, I thought it was a really cool new villain to see pop up in Barry's Rogues Gallery.
Perfectly apt choice.
All right, for me, I Killer Be Killed by the what I consider the legendary team of Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips is their latest entry in their already prodigious catalog of noir titles. And this is a sort of a deconstruction of like the vigilante concept, so familiar to readers from the 1970s forward. And we talked about, we critiqued the first issue when we did on Off the Rack. And this is a deeply disturbing book, and I mean that in the best possible way, because the main character may or may not be succumbing to the influence of some sort of mystical demon. So either it's that or he's clearly mentally ill and deranged. But either way, what I find so compelling about the story, and I'm going to talk more about this book in another category down the stretch as well, is you almost want to root for this guy, even though the way he's acting and the way he's conducting himself is frankly horrific. And that's what makes the story so compelling and the writing so masterful, is because he's very much a three-dimensional figure. And when I say villain, I don't mean like, twirling your mustache and tying the damsel in distress to the train tracks type of villain. This is a deeply disturbed, conflicted young man who is killing people, and one could argue he's killing people who deserve it. But at the same time, the damage he's doing to himself and those around him, I think makes him one of the most pathetically compelling villains in comics right now. And again, this is not a book I think for everyone, because it's extremely brutal and grim in many ways. It's also just someone it's really just also taking away the edge of the vigilante aspect. It's also someone in their 20s just kind of struggling through the netherworld of that period of one's life. And it's a book that's operating on many levels very effectively, very disturbingly, and I can't think of a more, for lack of a better term, villainous protagonist in comics right now. So my selection again is Dylan from Kill or Be Killed.
Beautifully stated, Chris.
Thank you, brother.
Dylan was actually one of my backups, too.
Ah.
But the one that I ultimately went with was Ultra Woman. Okay, so this is another nod to the Phil Jimenez written Superwoman series. The lead character, or characters, of which was nominated by Pants as a best hero. Ultra Woman is secretly Lena Luthor. All right, she is the sister of Lex Luthor. Now, this is a character that's been around in one form or another for a good long time. In pre-crisis days, she was just kind of a nice, relatively normal young woman, wife and mother, who was horrified by the criminal career of her brother and was forced to go into hiding and assume a changed name in order to hide from him. But here in the 21st century, Lena Luthor has been given kind of a radical overhaul by DC Entertainment across multiple platforms. Lena Luthor is showing up as a more active character and something of an antagonistic character in things like DC Superhero Girls, the Supergirl TV show, and now in the Superwoman comic. Because in the post-Flashpoint DC universe, Lena Luthor has suffered horrible. She's got some kind of a horrible, crippling, degenerative condition, and her brother Lex was trying desperately to heal this condition. Failed. Basically, was forced to shut her away while he continued to work on her problem. Somehow, she got mixed up with an anti-mother box from Apocalypse, and she ended up evolving like hyperhuman intelligence, so dwarfing even her brothers. And in addition to becoming frighteningly powerful, she ends up constructing a new cybernetic body for herself, which is like massively large and not accidentally evocative of Lex Luthor's classic green and purple armored suit. In addition to having these fantastic powers and this terrifying new physical aspect, she's also insufferably arrogant, which makes her a fine villain character, to say the least. And she's got a major mad-on for her brother Lex. She wants to conquer Metropolis, which Luthor has always thought of as his private domain. And then she wants to proceed to use the resources of the anti-mother box to take over the entire universe. So she's a heavy hitter, pretty plainly. But at the same time, she's only as weak as her human wetware, and that's something that kind of proved to be her undoing. Plus, she is the head of an entire army of superpowered Bizarro clones of Lois Lane. So her Bizarruses. So that's naturally going to appeal to me as Bizarro's #1 fan. So that's why I went with Ultra Woman and her host of Bizarruses as my choice for best new villain of this year. And as for the listeners, their choice was Steve Rogers, Agent of Hydra.
Good choice.
Wow.
Very good choice.
I went to very controversial developments with that character this year, so that's what the listeners chose. Second choice was Godspeed was actually tied for second with the listeners.
Okay.
So you're in good company there, Brian.
I feel vindicated.
And right up there with Godspeed was the Victim Syndicate, a group of characters from Detective Comics. Coming in third after that was Muse from the Charles Soule Daredevil. Other people who got some votes, the Mud King from Rick Remender's 7 to Eternity got a couple of votes. Kobik from Thunderbolts and Standoff on Pleasant Hill. Mr. Misery, the bad guys from Department H, Jeff Lemire's thing there. And, of course, other scattershot single nomination getters.
Excellent.
So there they are. I'm thinking we ought to be reviewing at the end of each of these. Okay, so the 4 nominees for Best New Hero were the heroes from Black Hammer, Superwoman, Sugar and Spike, and Champions. And the nominees for Best New Villain are Dylan from Kill or Be Killed, Godspeed, Ultra Woman and Her Bizarruses, and Steve Rogers, Agent of Hydra.
Okay. Yes, because at the very end we will give you details on how to vote for the award winners and a time frame and all that good stuff at the very end of the show then. All right, so next up is Best New Comic that first shipped in 2016. I'm going with the new volume of Silver Surfer.
And I am going...
it's his turn!
Right. I must observe the sequence.
Murd, no trouble, my friend. My selection is Brian Wood's Briggs Land.
Ooh, all right. Mine is Future Quest.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I mean, mine is a bit of a cheat because it's just the Silver Surfer ongoing comic with Mike Allred art and Dan Slott writing. They start a new volume again, but it's one of the first books I grabbed out of my pile. It's visually stunning to me, the art style and some of the wacky things that Mike Allred does. Dan Slott writes these characters tremendously. Dawn Greenwood and Norrin Radd's interactions are nothing short of spectacular. I mean, just the ups and downs they have. It's really an emotional roller coaster, and some of these issues, there's some really hard-hitting stuff going on there, and some heartbreaking stuff. And, I mean, of course, I love the whole Doctor Who-ish type of feel with the Traveler and the Companion along, but this is my favorite new comic to come out in 2016. Again, bit of a cheat with the numbering, but it came out with the new number 1. It came out in January of 2016. I checked. So, Silver Surfer, I think Volume 7, I think is what it's up to right now.
Well, fear not. If we can't bend our own rules, who can?
Well, it's not bending it. It's all legal.
Yep. And I share your love of that series. And my only complaint about it is that it's fallen so far behind schedule in 2016.
Yeah.
All right. Briggs, I mentioned this on the show before. As many listeners know, I'm a huge fan of the work of Brian Wood. Literally everything I've read by him, I've enjoyed thoroughly. I think he's one of the top writers of the business because he just seems to master any genre and just run with it and do something new and interesting. This story is a take on sort of think about this back in the 80s where you had like sort of the survivalist trend of like people out living in compounds or in the woods and arming themselves, forming militias, and you still see that in our pop culture ever since. And expecting apocalyptic scenarios or they're in feuds with the government or what have you. And this particular story it has a very Shakespearean feel to it in that the Briggs family has controlled about 100 square miles of territory in upstate New York in their own private compound. And they're a separatist group, they and their family and their followers. And it's about how the patriarch is in prison, and his wife, who married him when she was very young, is now a middle-aged woman. She has 3 sons, and she's trying to wrest control of the clan from her imprisoned husband, who's clearly a killer, and try to take it kind of in a different direction. And it's how she also has to maneuver among her 3 sons. All have different agendas. You're not sure whether or not they're actually loyal to her, trying to undermine her. And it's the kind of story I don't think anybody does better than Brian Wood. The political dynamic in play, the intrigue, coupled with the fact that you're dealing with a family and just the tensions of those families as they're engaged in these extraordinary events. I can't recommend this title enough. It's one of those books when it's out. It's one of the first books I read of that week. I think it's already been an option for a television show. It'll be a great television show if it's done properly, and hopefully Brian Wood will be involved in that. Highest recommendation, Briggs Land from Dark Horse, best new comic of 2016.
Hi-ho. All right. I went with Future Quest. I mean, there may be comic series out there that had been better written or better drawn or better or featured more interesting characters. I don't know. But this one, just to me, was just such a great example of the kind of comic. It succeeded so well at being the comic that it wanted to be. It did such a fantastic job of demonstrating exactly the right way to polish off not just one, but multiple classic kids' entertainment properties, putting a slightly new shine on them, making them a little more contemporarily accessible, and bridging the gap perfectly between young and old readers. It was just so fantastically entertaining, too. It was written by Jeff Parker, art primarily by Evan Doc Shaner, with additional material and or backup stories drawn by several other artists, including Steve the Dude Rude, which is a rare treat. And it was just so very entertaining and so perfect for antique little boys of a certain age, such as ourselves. It's something that I really looked forward to every month. And possibly more so than any other title on the shelves, if I'm being honest here. It was just a real treat, for the Saturday morning maven that I've always been and will probably always be. So, yeah, I decided I would put it on the slate for me.
And I don't think I've mentioned it so far in this episode, but of course, since this is our nomination, I love to use the phrase, this is our hill. And these are our beats. So this is just our thoughts. We get the listeners involved as well, but I just love hearing you talk about stuff like that.
Oh, thanks, Brian. I love listening to you guys enthuse about the things you've been enjoying as well. Yep. And, of course, the listeners, as we've said before, they give us sometimes they give us little hints as to things that we hadn't been reading ourselves.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Maybe be paying more attention to.
Uh-huh.
And as for those listeners, their choice actually was Kill or Be Killed for Best New Series.
Okay.
Well done.
So no argument from this room, certainly. Other things, a series called The Black Monday Murders. I think that's a Hickman.
It's excellent. I've read the first couple. All
right, yeah, because there were a lot of the people who nominated this thing nominated it in multiple categories. So it's got some devoted fans.
Yes.
Tied with that was actually Power Man and Iron Fist.
Oh!
So you're talking and they're listening, Chris.
I'll be talking about that later, too.
Let's see. Other things that got some nominations, Spider-Man and Deadpool got a couple. Let's see. Wonder Woman, Motor Girl, Aquaman, Jessica Jones got a couple. Shade the Changing
Aquaman
Girl.
is a great choice as well.
I said Jessica Jones, Scarlet Witch, the Flintstones, and Black Hammer in this category as well. Yeah, there's a pretty diverse bag of nominations in that particular category. But the one that won out was Kill or Be Killed. So for the Best New Comic, your nominees are Briggs Land, Silver Surfer, Future Quest, and Kill or Be Killed.
All right. Next up is Best Limited Series, where the last issue shipped in 2016. My nomination is The Vision.
Oh, you took mine.
Well, I'm sorry, I had to go first.
All right. I'll put in backup. Mine is The Shadow, The Death of Margot Lane.
All right.
Wow.
And mine shall be Britannia.
Oh, good choice, Mert. Damn, I should have thought of that.
I'm so happy I get to go first. I don't need any backups or anything. Thank you for letting me do that.
Consider it your handicap, my friend.
What? Anyway, I mean, we've gushed on and on about Tom King and his vision. And again, yeah, I didn't read too many limited series, but I also did enjoy his Sheriff of Babylon. I was considering going with that way, but I had to go with The Vision. Because, oh dear God, just his take on The Vision and just everything with this, the darkness of it in suburbia. And I mean, others can talk more eloquently than I can on this. I just, The Vision, boom, enough said.
If I may piggyback for a moment,
Please help me out here. I'm drowning.
No, you're fine. We've talked about The Vision at length on the show, and deservedly so, because I just want to reemphasize, for me, as many people know, Marvel is always my go-to company when it comes to the characters I love the most. This is without question for me one of the most innovative series Marvel has ever produced in its history, certainly in recent years. I can't think of a series in recent years that so takes, The Vision isn't as iconic as some of the other big characters, but to me he's iconic. To me he's one of the core Avengers of all time, frankly. And to approach him the way Tom King and his collaborators did, because when you think about it, the premise is very simple. The Vision wants a family. and he wants to live, quote, like a normal suburban person with this family that he's basically created himself. And the consequences of his actions and his decisions, and how those consequences affect other characters in the Marvel Universe in addition to his family and his history. I mean, this is a book that at times I was laughing, at times I was horrified, at times I was deeply moved and nearly in tears. Tom King is without question one of the best writers working in comics today, without question, for this series alone. I don't think anybody else can really touch what he achieved right now in this series, and especially when I find myself as a reader just drowning under one mindless, boring, event after another. This is something special, and I applaud Marvel Comics for giving Tom King the room to tell his story. Now, I'm sure they wouldn't have done that if it was like Spider-Man or somebody else, and I condemn Marvel for that kind of cowardice. But when it comes to the Vision, because he's not a so-called A-list character, boy, they just made him one, because I can't think of a series. Like, if I want to recommend something to people, I'm putting this trade in their hand immediately, right away. Forget, the gazillionth Deadpool or the gazillionth crossover event. No one's going to remember that stuff 15 minutes from now, but they're sure as hell going to remember this series. Highest possible recommendation, pants, great selection.
And as a bonus, if you're a single issue buyer, Tom took over the letters page. And
it's great.
And was just answering and talking through it. It's great. Such
a class move.
My choice, my backup choice is The Shadow, The Death of Margot Lane. I'm a huge fan of Matt Wagner. He'll be getting some love from me later on in this episode. And he almost single-handedly has sort of revitalized the presence of the Shadow in this comic book medium that we love. And this is his latest effort with the character. And if you love the pulp world of the Shadow, if you love Matt Wagner, he does such a reverential take on this character. And to sort of appease Murd's fears, we talked about this a couple months ago, it's not a girl in the refrigerator story.
Thank goodness.
And I didn't think it would, because frankly Wagner's just too subtle and talented for something like that. And he so perfectly captures that 1930s world of the Shadow, and his artwork and his breathtaking, the way he captures atmosphere and mystery and sort of the shadowy world, no pun intended, that Lamont Cranston operates in. And if you're a fan of pulp, if you're a fan of the character, if you're a fan of Matt Wagner, or if you just want to read a great miniseries, which is steeped in the history of one of the icons. I mean, there's no Batman without the Shadow, for example. I highly recommend this miniseries. I think it's available in hardcover, and I don't think soft yet, but top marks. That's my best limited series of 2016.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear that my fears were unfounded, Chris.
Indeed.
So my choice is Britannia, put out by Valiant Entertainment. Yeah, Chris and I have both been gushing about this one for several months as well. Written by Peter Milligan, art by Juan Jose Rip. And it's the story of the ancient Roman centurion Antonius Axius, who on a mission up to the British Isles saves the life of a Vestal Virgin, and her order, the Vestal Virgins, give him secret knowledge and powers of the workings of the human mind as a reward, as a result of which he becomes a master detective, or detectioner as they call him in those days. And so it's a tale of the ancient Roman Empire, set mostly up in the British Isles, which at that time were a Roman colony. And it's also kind of a detective story, and it's a supernatural horror story, and it's something of a war story since it involves military culture. It's steeped in history and mythology of the period, and it involves fighting this sort of Celtic demon that resides up there in those isles, and it's a taut mystery story, and it's got all kinds of mystic atmosphere and human. It's not just demons that are the bad people in this story. There's plenty of human depravity and badness happening as well. So it's a 4-issue miniseries. It apparently did very well for Valiant because they claim it's been reprinted. It's sold out like 10 times over. They're already planning a sequel to it.
That's wonderful.
Yep, it's good news certainly. So I was thinking of nominating that in the sleeper category too, but I came up with something else for that. So I plunked it down here as my nominee for Best Limited Series of the Year.
Mert, I want to thank you for bringing that book up because I'm ashamed to say I forgot to – because I love that series and I would have fit it in somewhere. And as I was finishing up my nominees today, I totally forgot about it. I want to second everything you said. Also, it includes wonderful essays in the back of each issue which go into more detail in the Roman history and culture that's being addressed in the story. And I'm a passionate student of ancient Rome. And its history, its culture, and the book does a wonderful job of capturing some of those elements. It takes place during the time of the Emperor Nero, who, as I'm sure some listeners know, wasn't always the most stable individual. And they go into sort of his role as emperor and how he ruled. The Vestal Virgins, of course, were literally virgins. They were not allowed to have sex, and they were held as sort of these sacred oracles in Roman culture. And if a Vestal Virgin actually allowed herself to be penetrated, so to speak, she would be buried alive for that offense. So, excuse me, the book goes into all of that, and it's just also a great rip-roaring, as Merd said, detective story. It's a horror story. It's also, the main character is a Roman legionary, and you get that culture as well. But the softcover, if it's not out, it's coming out soon. Immediate recommendation.
As for the listeners, they share the general enthusiasm for the Vision, safe to say. It was their choice by one of the biggest landslides. Not the biggest, but one of the biggest in this year's nominations process. In fact, so overwhelmingly popular was the Vision that nothing else got more than 2 nominations.
Wow.
So we have, going in to the final slate, a 4-way tie for the listeners' nomination. So there are going to be 7 different nominees.
Wow.
For the Best Limited Series of 2016.
Okay.
So, and those 4 are Klaus, Grant Morrison's shamanistic barbarian Santa Claus story from Boom Studios, Tokyo Ghost, Death of X, and Superman, Lois and Clark.
That was a good one, too.
Okay.
So there you are. You have those 4 for the listeners, and for us, you have The Vision, Shadow, The Death of Margot Lane, and Britannia.
Very good.
That's a great example, again, of how great 2016 was for comics. All those wonderful selections. Yeah. Bravo.
And again, no one mentioned Sheriff of Babylon, which is also another really good book.
Yes, it is.
I'm trying to think if it actually finished. I think it did finish.
I'm pretty sure it did, yeah.
All right, so up next is Best Single Issue or One-Shot. For me, it could be nothing else but DC Universe Rebirth #1.
My selection is Vision Issue 7.
Okay. I'm going to slip in there with Lock and Key Small World.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, we did a whole episode when this book came out, DC Universe Rebirth #1, because I wanted to talk about it. I have read this book probably half a dozen times, if not more. It gets to some point in this book where I have to put it down because I get so emotionally involved in this book. Everything with Wally West, Kid Flash in it is priceless. I own 2 original pages from this book, consecutive with from art from Yvonne Hayes, where Wally meets Olinda Park again. Just a gorgeous page. Just so much about this hit all my buttons. There's still questions left unanswered for this today. Yes, I knew going into they would take it out slowly throughout the DC universe, but this is what got me hooked back in to start reading more DC, because I wasn't reading anything at all, and I'm still not reading a whole lot, but definitely following some of the plot points left in this book. I mean, I have actually here, I got a copy in Comic-Con. This is, I think, like a 3rd or 4th printing I have here in my hands here. The 3rd printing with Wally West on the cover. The artists in here, with Ethan Van Sciver, Gary Frank, Yvonne Hayes, Phil Jimenez, and Jeff Johns just, I mean, it's cliche, but he knocked it out of the park with this. This is just...
He sure did.
This is just tremendous. This was the easiest nominee I had for the best single issue or one-shot.
Yeah, it does seem like something of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And, having thumbed through almost every single comic I bought this past year, including all the DC ones I bought. I saw so many things being teased out of that one comic. So many threads that continue to be spun throughout the warp and weft of the DC universe even now.
Yep. It did what it set out to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we can look forward to, as mentioned in the previews, we're going to have the Batman and Flash crossover in April, where they're apparently going to address this mystery. So, looking forward to that.
The button.
All right, my selection is the Vision number 7. Out of this entire already instant classic, this is my favorite issue. It details the history between the Vision and the Scarlet Witch. I nearly wept by the end of this story because I mean, I'm in awe of how Tom King knew his history when he composed this story, like the whole series, because it's so deeply invested in the history of the Vision, of the Scarlet Witch, the Avengers, this issue and the whole series. And you just know that this writer loves that world, and he took the time, which many writers do not do at all, to lovingly address it and put it in its place in the context of what he was creating here without ignoring what had gone on before. And essentially, the entire foundation of the story, so much of it is what happened between Wanda and the Vision, and right down to the really crushing end where in flashback scenes, that they have this reconciliation, and then Wanda gives the Vision her brain patterns, and he essentially uses those to construct his synthesoid wife. It's one of the most moving single issues I've read in quite some time. I can't recommend it enough. And I have to mention my very close runner-up here, by the way. James Robinson, Tony Harris, the C-3PO one-shot. It was tough going back and forth between these two for me. If you want to read a master class on the art of the one-shot comic, just get C-3PO. Enough said there.
And we'll return to C-3PO in just a moment, actually. But having triangulated my choice based on you gentlemen's choices and that of the listeners, that's how I arrived at Lock and Key.
It's difficult in your position to go after us. I'm sorry. But
it's fine. It's fine.
But you have all these backups, so you're fine.
I knew the job was dangerous when I took it. Lock and Key Small World was kind of a late entry. I think it came out in December, actually, so it just barely made it in. Yes, right under the door. So it is a one-shot set in the world of Joe Hill's Lock and Key series. And it's a one-shot that's set in the history of the Locke family, so well before the events of the Lock and Key series that IDW published. It looks at the eccentric members of the Locke family, their rather non-traditional familial structure, as they were back in the early 20th century. So this is an earlier incarnation of the Locke family. There's like the eccentric. I'm not sure what exactly the patriarch of the family does, but he comes off as like an absent-minded college professor. His long-suffering wife, his multiple rambunctious children, his brother, and they all live together under one roof, and they're all just going about their lives while exploring the possibilities of the magic keys and locks that fill Key House, which is the ancestral home of the Locke family. And it's just it doesn't necessarily fit into the plot developments of the series as it exists, but it's a look back into the family heritage of the characters that we know from that series, and it shows some fun different things that are being done with the various magic keys, which are forged by the Locke's ancestor out of the Whispering Iron, which is actually the forged from it's extra-dimensional in origin, safe to say. And whatever magic key you make out of it, it does exactly what you design it to do. So, but it's a really fun concept. I mean, people have been bugging us to read Lock and Key for years. We finally got around to doing a Book of the Month club out of it not too long ago. And here we have a brand new piece of Lock and Key content to read. And I read that over Christmas and thought it was just the bee's knees. So slap that down there as my choice for best single issue or one-shot. Meanwhile, the listeners, actually, Lock and Key was actually my third choice. The winner in the listeners' voting was far and away, this was the biggest landslide this year. It was DCU Rebirth #1. It got like twice as many nominees as any other thing in any other category. That's how popular that was with our listenership. So again, you're in good company, Brian.
Feel vindicated.
But their second choice was also my second choice. That's why I decided to go with Lock and Key instead.
Okay.
But their second choice was, in fact, Star Wars Special C-3PO, The Phantom Limb. Yes, which, as Chris said, is a fine. Robinson and Harris, one of the greatest creative teams of the past 25 years in comics, and doing just this fantastic job of spinning a single-issue, self-contained story featuring a bunch of characters who are just robots and really making the reader feel tremendously powerful pathos for these inhuman machines, half of which don't even speak English. So yes, fantastic job with characterization. The art was otherworldly and gripping, and so I absolutely support the listeners in having chosen that as their second choice. Other things that there were really very little consensus. I think beyond DCU Rebirth, there was less consensus in this category than any other. But let's see, the first issue of Black Widow was one thing that got nominated. Nightwing number 9, Superman number 7, Power Rangers Annual number 1. Let's see, DCU Rebirth over and over again. A couple different issues of The Vision got nominated. I don't know if one person did nominate number 7, Chris. Batman number 51, Morning Glories number 50, the one-shot Klaus and the Witch of Winter from that same Grant Morrison concept. Yep. So there you go. Your nominees for single issue or one-shot are The Vision number 7, DC Universe Rebirth number 1, Lock and Key Small World, and the Star Wars C-3PO Special.
Okay. Up next is Best Cliffhanger or Moment. Now, I must not have a bone to pick with you, but this could have been 2 separate categories because I have a moment, but it's not a cliffhanger.
Doesn't need to be.
I understand that, but I could have a cliffhanger that would be so. I think it's something to think about for next time.
Address your concerns to Peter John Rios.
Hey, again, this is our hill. These are our beans.
Yeah, but it's still got Peter's DNA all over it.
Oh, yeah.
Even all these years later.
Oh, my God. All right. Well, my choice is actually the best moment, and again, another emotional moment for me. DC Universe Rebirth number 1, Barry remembers Wally. How could I ever forget you? That's my nominee for the best moments of 2016.
Excellent.
All right, mine comes with a huge spoiler warning. If you are not up to date on Saga, turn off. Do not listen to what I'm about to say.
I actually just read it, so I'm good to go. Sock it to me.
Okay. My best moment is the death of Isabel.
Yeah, how about that?
In Saga.
All right. Yep. Actually, 1 or 2 people nominated that among the listeners, and so I've already had that spoiled for me, so no worries.
Sorry, Bert.
Like I said, I knew the job was dangerous when I took it. Taking it for the team. And even to this moment, I'm kind of torn between 2 options, but the one that I'm going to go with is Justice League number 50, when Batman reveals that there are actually 3 Jokers running around. So one of the last moments of the Darkseid War story.
Excellent choice. I mean, I could have chose the cliffhanger moment from this book, DC Rebirth number 1, which I'm sure some of the listeners did as well.
Oh, you are so right.
But for me, hands down, there's so many great moments in this book. The moment where we see Kid Flash for the first time, I'm like, oh my God, it's Kid Flash again, his own costume. But the build-up between Wally and Barry to this moment, the writing, the artwork, the emotion that just jumps off of the pages here. I had to put it down now. I have to put this book down at this point so many times. I knew it was coming. I almost couldn't get through it. But that moment, how could I ever forget you? Dear sweet God. And yeah, I mean, of course, I've tried to find the original artwork for that page, which is a whole other interesting story which I can't reveal on the air. Obviously, I don't have it, but what a moment! I mean, I can't even say more. Just what a great moment.
As many listeners know, I'm a diehard fan of Saga. I make a point of trying to fit it in somewhere ever in these awards because, frankly, it's still consistent with one of the best comics being produced. And this is a moment that further reaffirmed how this is a book where anything can happen, Nothing is sacred, and I mean that in the best possible way. There are no iconic, cinematic properties that have to be protected. This is Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples' baby, and they're going to do what they feel best serves the story. And Isabel, of course, is the very charming, endearing ghost who, I want to say she stepped on a landmine or something like that. And so she's like a floating torso with her entrails hanging out, and she sort of acts like as a babysitter to the main character's child.
Hazel,
thank you. And there's just one issue. She just dies. I mean, she is murdered. It's very quick. It's not like it's some big dramatic, hullabaloo. She just gets killed, and that's it. And it just that the way they handled her death, because she was in the book almost from the beginning. She's very very endearing character. She's just gone. And again, this book pulls no punches when it comes to, even though it's in this sort of space operatic science fantasy realm. At the end of the day, it's about people, it's about life, it's about relationships, and it's about dealing with the inevitability of things like death, and how quick and completely mundane and unromantic in this case, and brutal it can be. Easily one of the most breathtaking moments of the year for me in comics.
Right. And let's see. So, I went round and round with myself about this one. I came very close to choosing that moment in Secret 6, number 12.
Oh.
The one that I went on a way to tell you about, Brian. The one where we finally, after all these years, get to see Ralph Dibny back alive, well, smiling, and in his elongated man costume again.
Yeah.
We're going to go get our family back. So that's one that kind of stuck with me. But, yeah, this one was pretty impactful, too, because it introduces a cool mystery. And the one that I chose was actually when Batman, in conversation with Hal Jordan, reveals that when he was sitting in the Mobius chair and had access to all knowledge in the universe, every fact and figure that had been accumulated by Metron over the years, one of the first thing he asked it was, what's the Joker's real name? And he just kind of sat there and said, no, that can't be. That's impossible. And that was fairly early in the Darkseid War story that happened. And in the final issue then, Justice League number 50, as things are winding down, Batman tells Hal finally what the chair told him, and it turns out that it didn't really give him one name, it just told him there are 3 Jokers in existence. And so there's a scene in the Batcave where he's looking at monitors of different Jokers, which sort of look like interpretations of the Joker from different periods of comics history. And so it all seems very, parallel Earth-ish to me. There may be another explanation for it beyond that, but it's something that's intrigued me ever since. And I'm sure we'll get plenty of explanation for it, probably more than we ever really wanted in High Time. But yeah, it's something that I thought was worthy of celebration. And besides, I didn't actually put Darkseid War down for anything else, and it is, one of the best stories DC has done, in my opinion, in the past couple of years. So I wanted to represent it in this year's voting. And there it is. Now, as for the listeners, this is another sizable landslide. Not quite as big as the DCU Rebirth special itself as Best One-Shot. But their choice for Best Moment was the final cliffhanger image of Batman finding the comedian's iconic blood-stained smiley face button from Watchmen in the Batcave. Yep, that is far and away the listener's favorite cliffhanger or moment of the year. Second place, though, was a tie between Barry remembering Wally, your choice, and this is a good one for you too, Chris. Hail Hydra. From the end of Steve Rogers' Captain America number 1.
It's good.
So, but the comedian wins out. Also, not a whole lot of consensus among the listeners beyond that in this category. Let's see. There's a Deadshot accidentally killing his brother from one of the Suicide Squad publications DC did. Hellboy overthrowing Hell. There's just so much stuff about... let's see. Black Widow escaping from the Helicarrier in the first issue of her series by Wade and Somni. Let's see. A couple of things that happened in Civil War 2 got nods. There were 1 or 2 nominees for Chris's choice. And a couple of things from the Vision as well. And lots of other random things. But, yeah, the final slate then for this category is The Death of Isabel from Saga number 38, Flash remembers Wally West from DC Rebirth number 1, the reveal of 3 Jokers in Justice League number 50, and the bloody comedian's button at the end of DC Universe Rebirth number 1.
All right. So up next is Best Storyline within a series or across multiple series. And this, I simply could not come up with something that I felt I could properly nominate, so I had to recuse myself from this particular category.
Yep, this is one that I struggled with as well, Brian.
Okay. So what's up? What do you got there, Chris?
Mine is The Black Widow, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Most Wanted.
Ooh, good choice. Mine, this was tough, but I went with Astro City number 37 and 38. It's a 2-part story, doesn't have an official title.
Okay.
All right, so this was also a tough category because there was a lot of great stuff to choose from. A close runner-up for me was the Doctor Strange, The End of Magic storyline from that series, but we'll talk more about that later as well. I chose this for a couple reasons. One, I'm a huge fan of the Wade Samney team. I think they're one of the great creative duos in comics right now, going back to the work on Daredevil. I've always loved the Black Widow character. This story really explores her Red Room history in a way that we really haven't been exposed to it before, going into it in great depth. But counterbalancing that is some of the most kinetic and invigorating action sequences I've ever seen in a comic book. I'm sure Pants can vouch for that as well, because I know you've read these stories. And, I mean, the book does a wonderful job of balancing just what a thrilling, classic spy character Natasha Romanoff is, with how damaged she is in terms of her past and coming to grips with that, and just all the terrible ramifications of how she was brought up and how she was programmed to be an assassin, and the dark legacy that she's still grappling with. Again, these are 2 masters at the top of their form, telling a story that is very action oriented. But again, as masters, they don't get lost in the action. The narrative is still there and very much bringing everything along. You never forget what the story is about and the impact it's having on Natasha, her world, and just the character itself. If you're a fan of the Black Widow character, and or you just want to read a really well told 6-issue story by 2 masters of the form in trade paperback, Black Widow, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Most Wanted.
All right. Like you, Brian, I had a hard time settling on something for this. I thought about the return of Wally West in The Titans, as written by Dan Abnett. The 2 different storylines interwoven in the Wonder Woman series by Greg Rucka. A couple of different things Tom King did in Batman. But in the end, I came back to these 2 issues of Kurt Busiek's Astro City series, because Busiek, he's come back ablaze here. He's really hit his stride again with Astro City this year, which is a shame, because just as he was really hitting a gallop with some of the stuff he was doing in that series, he hit the icy patch of poor health. And so as a result, which has been a problem for him in the past. So as a result, we're several months behind now since we've had an issue of Astro City. But these 2 issues, I mean, he's kind of mining stuff that he set up with Astro City years ago. And diehard fans of the series have been wondering when he'd ever get around to exploring in more detail. But in issues number 37 and 38, like I said, there's no real title for this story. I'm sort of unofficially calling it The Ballad of Silver String. It's revealing the origins of a character that he kind of plopped into the background of an early Astro City story called The Bouncing Beatnik.
Okay.
He kind of looks like a big, silly, orange-skinned, hairy beatnik who bounces, and he talks in Hep lingo, and exactly, finger snaps, which is, I think he only has like 3 fingers on each hand, so that makes it even, so he's not quite human. But
you only need 2.
I suppose. Yeah, 3's better. Anyway, we finally learn a little bit of his background here, and also some of the background of Astro City as a setting, because one of the great strengths of the Astro City series over the years has been that the setting, Astro City, has been so developed and so atmospheric, and it's been a character in and of itself. So it's been home to many different forms and generations of superheroic adventuring over the decades. But this story takes us back to even before it was officially founded, when a mysterious young guitar man comes strolling into town. He calls himself Silverstring. He's got a guitar on which he's able to plunk notes that constitute a form of folk magic that sort of insinuate itself into the soil on which Astro City would eventually be founded. And in coming decades, we are told in this 2-issue story, numbers 37 and 38, that at different times over the years, once every 10, 20 years or so, a need wells up in the people for the ability to give voice to their feelings of a need for a form of revolution. You know, it's any time a musical counterculture evolves in Astro City or in the United States beyond, this magic that was left behind by Silverstring manifests itself. It's almost like the Captain Universe's unipower from the Marvel Universe. It finds like a human host, merges with it, and becomes this personification of what a particular countercultural or revolutionary musical genre means to its listeners. So this first happened with a character called Mr. Cakewalk in the early decades of the 20th century. And then in 1925, Jazz Baby emerged, who's kind of a super-powered flapper. And eventually it gave us the Bouncing Beatnik, and going up to more to the present day, this story is narrated by a character called The Broken Man, who appeared in the first issue of the current volume of Astro City. He's a purple skin, green hair, looks very much like a late 80s Vertigo character. And so we finally get a little bit of background into these mysterious sort of musical-themed counterculture icons like the Bouncing Beatnik, who've been popping up in the background of Astro City stories for years. And this is something that I've been dying to read. Busiek gets a chance to show off his ability his knowledge of period detail of history, politics, and of course culture, music specifically here. And he just spins a couple of great period yarns set in this little superhero reality of Astro City that he's created and that I have adored ever since the mid-'90s. So, yeah, I'm very pleased that Busiek was put out as many quality issues of this series this year as he did. I'm sorry that he hit the misfortune of his poor health. And so I decided to extend him the courtesy of nominating this story, which I was dying to read, as my favorite storyline of the year. Now, turning to the listeners, you need not fear or feel guilt, Chris, for not having nominated The Last Days of Magic, because that is the listener's choice.
Ah.
Yes,
Terrific.
The current volume of Doctor Strange.
But they will also get a second voice since I recused myself.
True. But actually they would have anyway because the listeners had a tie.
Oh, okay, so that's going to be 5 now, what you're telling me?
Well, no, there'll only be 4 because you couldn't come up with one. So they're the two things that were tied for first place, one of them will be their nominee and one of them will take the place of yours.
Okay.
So there will still only be 4. So there you go. The Last Days of Magic, and the other one that was tied with The Last Days of Magic is The Vision, number 1 through 12.
Ah, okay.
So those are the 2 listener nominees. Let's see, other things that they enjoyed. The Dark Side War got a few nominees. The Deluge from Dan Abnett's Aquaman series.
Excellent story.
Greg Rucka's Wonder Woman Year 1 storyline, alternating with The Lies in that Wonder Woman series. The Avengers Standoff at Pleasant Hill. The Isn't It Romantic arc in Spider-Man Deadpool, End of Games from Darth Vader, Red Room Revelations from Black Widow, Sinestro's Law from the Green Lantern titles, Bloodshot Island from Bloodshot, the Eidolon story from Warren Ellis's James Bond series.
Good selection. Woo!
And selected arcs from a variety of other different series, Black Hammer, Killer Be Killed, Descender, etc. But the listeners' choices ultimately were The Last Days of Magic and The Vision, and we'll supplement that with Black Widow, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Most Wanted, and Astro City number 37 and 38, which I call The Ballad of Silverstring.
All right. Next category is Best Sleeper/Surprise Hit. My nominee is Sugar and Spike from Legends of Tomorrow.
All right.
My nominee from Avatar by Garth Ennis is Dreaming Eagles.
And mine is Carnage.
And, gentlemen, I have to run to the water closet, so if you could go Pan, Smurd, then I'll go last, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Won't be a problem.
I'll be right back. Thank you.
All right. Sugar and Spike. As I recall, originally DC announced several six-issue miniseries. Among them were Firestorm, Metamorpho, Metal Men, and Sugar and Spike. Well, they took those and put them into this Legends of Tomorrow anthology instead. So you got a huge, essentially like an 80-page issue each month, which had those 4 stories in them. And I'm not sure we actually really originally picked up the first issue. No, I think you guys did it as an off-the-rack. Maybe that's how I got it. But, I'm reading along, okay, Firestorm's okay, Metamorpho, then Sugar and Spike, oh my God, this is amazing. Again, we already talked about, Keith Giffen mining his knowledge of DC history, just the obscure stuff, which I had actually sort of known a lot of these things, and the art, which I'll get to later on by Bilquis Evely. It just knocked my socks out. I'm like, why did I not hear about this before? And I'm so glad I got this. Because at that point, I only got the first issue. I made sure I got every other issue after that, read the whole thing, loved it, and I was so pleased that I did. So that's my nominee for Best Sleeper Surprise Hit, Sugar and Spike.
Yes, it's just excellent brain candy. Love that story, too. Okay, so for me, now I mentioned I thought about doing Britannia for this, but I wanted to. This was a very good series, and it wasn't necessarily that great a hit. It lasted 16 issues, which is really about the best sort of off the beaten path series from Marvel can expect these days. They don't seem to want anything to last more than like 2 years over there these days. But it's even if it wasn't that popular with readers necessarily, it had its full 16-issue run, and even if it wasn't a surprise hit, it still, I think, fits the category in that I personally was surprised at how good it really was. And it's written by Jerry Conway, art by Mike Perkins. So, one of the masters of the Bronze Age coming back to Marvel to create something new. And it is a fine love letter to fans of Bronze Age Marvel horror-themed comics or Bronze Age villain protagonist comics. It follows the fortunes of Cletus Cassidy, the serial killer who is bonded with the spawn of Spider-Man's old symbiote costume, Venom. He was a big deal back in the 90s, you may remember.
Yes.
So here he is back again, but he falls in with a bunch of Darkhold cultists. And he gets embroiled in this prophecy for the return of the archdemon Thawne, the Elder God, a name that's been heard many times in the Marvel Universe over the years. And so he's embroiled in all that. Meanwhile, he's being hunted by a team of carnage busters, in effect, including John Jameson, who occasionally is wrestling with his own monstrous alter ego of Man-Wolf. And
Man-Wolf.
Yes, the Man-Wolf. And, of course, there are other monstrous symbiote characters thrown in. Eddie Brock is back as Toxin, and there are other symbiote spawn that show up, too, if you want to scratch that 90s itch. But for the most it's mostly a horror-adventure comic. It fits into the legacy of the classic Tomb of Dracula. And although Mike Perkins' art style doesn't really compare that well to Gene the Dean Collins, I mean, his use of atmosphere clearly draws from the same dark well as his. And it was a good read month to month. It digs into the psyche of Cletus Cassidy a little bit without making him too sympathetic. He remains a horrible murdering monster throughout. That's a pitfall that comics that feature villains as protagonists too often fall prey to, and Jerry Conway did not. And so it was a marvelous little surprise. I bought every single issue. I wish it could have gone on longer. It's a series from Marvel that I was sorry to see go when so many Marvel comics these days simply vanish into thin air before anybody has an opportunity to notice or care. So yeah, I give Carnage my nod for best sleeper of this year.
Wow, Mert, I never would have read that book, but based on what you just said, I have to pick that up.
I think it is something that you would enjoy, Chris. I know you to be a lover of Bronze Age Marvel horror, so.
And certainly if Jerry Conway's at the helm, even more so. So, well done. All right, now for me, as many listeners know, I'm a huge fan of Garth Ennis in general, especially of his military history comics. And this is not a surprise hit because I knew this was going to be great, but this is very much a sleeper. It's from the new company Avatar, who have been landing a lot of top-flight creators ever since they first appeared in previews. this past year. And this miniseries deals with Innes's take on the history of the Tuskegee Airmen, who, as some listeners might know, are volunteer African-American Army Air Force pilots who were the first black men who were allowed to fly fighter planes in World War II in the European theater. And Innes does a wonderful job here of taking you through the experience of some of these characters in this story. I mean, it's the characters are fictitious, but of course it's an historical backdrop, and what they deal with both on the home front and over the skies of Europe. And the really powerful plot device that acts as the narrative thread to the story is the fact that one of them airmen, as an older man, it's in the 1960s, so the civil rights movement is in full swing at this point, and his son is an activist, and he's very fired up about the movement and the injustices that African Americans were experiencing living in the United States at that time, and of course in previous decades. And the story is the two men sitting down on their porch because the son is sort of criticizing the father and sort of his take on the state of things in the 60s. And the father then tells the son about what he experienced in terms of the prejudice that he dealt with as a pilot in the Second World War. And I can't – every military comic Innes has written I've loved. This one I found especially compelling and powerful because all I'll say is at the end, without spoiling too much, the son is obviously moved by what his father is relaying to him and his experiences. And the father basically says, I'm paraphrasing because I have the book in front of me. He basically says, I never thought I'd end up being more afraid of my own country than of the Nazis, which is just a devastating way to end that story. And it's in hardcover now, and I'm sure you can find the issues as well. I owe our listener Jace Milam, who has his own podcast. He and I are going to team up in the near future. Jace, I haven't forgotten. I will get in touch with you when I have the time, and we're going to review that book in more detail. So Dreaming Eagles from Avatar is my best sleeper of 2016.
All right. And the listeners, for the listeners, we have got ourselves a three-way tie. So we're going to have 6 nominees in this category. And knotted up for the listeners are Black Hammer, The Vision, again, and The Flintstones from the DC Hanna-Barbera line.
Yes.
So there are 3 there for the listeners. Other things that got some scattershot nominations, Power Rangers, interesting, Green Lantern, Legend of Wonder Woman, Faith, Abnett's Aquaman, John Carter from Dynamite, Superman, Black Panther, Red Wolf, Hercules, Moon Knight, the Black Monday Murders, Rough Riders, everything but the kitchen sink. But those 3 were the ones that got the greatest number of votes. They all happen to get the same number of votes. So all 3 of them are now on the ballot, along with Carnage, Sugar and Spike from Legends of Tomorrow, and Dreaming Eagles.
All right. Up next is the best ongoing comic that need not have begun publication in 2016.
But could have.
My nominee is Silver Surfer.
My nominee is from Marvel, Star Wars.
And mine is Batman.
Oh, okay. I mean, I've already gone on and on about Silver Surfer, and I could go on and on about it, but just, like I said, it's at the top of my pile pretty much every month. Dan Slott, Mike Allred, just great stuff. Dawn Greenwood, Norrin Rad, Doctor Who, the whole thing. It's wonderful. I'm so glad I don't know why I had to renumber it, but I'm glad that it's continuing on with the same creative team intact.
As long as that's there, who cares what number is on the cover?
Exactly. So that's why it gets my nominee for best ongoing comic.
All right. I'm sure if Shane were, he'd probably concur with me. Huge Star Wars fan. That's been well established on the show. I was very excited when Marvel revisited the license, although I think Dark Horse did a wonderful job over the 20 years they had it. But this is a comic where every single issue I've found has been great, perfectly captures the feel of the Star Wars universe because it's following the main characters in the area in the time period after A New Hope. The humor is there, pitch perfect. The dynamics between the various characters, Han, Leia, Luke. I mean, Jason Aaron has not missed a beat in how well he's captured the Star Wars universe. There are stories that are quiet, like the fantastic Obi-Wan flashback stories where he's living on Tatooine. There are epic adventures involving all the characters. The capturing of Darth Vader in these stories, especially the Vader Down crossover with the equally great Darth Vader series, was just riveting and one of the most exciting. You talk about a crossover that meant something. Read Vader Down. That was a fantastic story. And this book is just very consistent. When I thought about best ongoing series, there was a lot of titles I could have chose for this category very easily for 2016. But this is a book that has yet to disappoint me. I'm just in awe of how Jason Aaron, with every single issue, I just get the sense that he's so jazzed to be doing this, and it just seems like he's having a lot of fun with it. Because a licensed property can get stale very quickly when it comes to creators working on it. That has not happened here at all. And if you're a Star Wars lover, or if you just want to read a really great adventure, space fantasy, space opera story, and especially if you love the original Star Wars universe, read this book. I mean, it is consistently outstanding every single issue, month after month.
And all right, so for me, I chose Batman, namely the Rebirth volume of Batman, as written by Tom King with art by Mikhail Khanin. And
also with originally to start out with David Finch.
Oh yes, thank you. So this encompasses a couple of different arcs. I Am Gotham, I Am Suicide, and then that seems to be the pattern Tom King is following with all of his arc titles. I Am Blank. But yeah, Tom King. We've said over and over again how much we appreciate his finesse as a writer. And he's digging into the Dark Knight. He's taking him in a couple of somewhat unusual new directions. But he's writing interesting bat stories. He's making them a little more accessible than some of the things he's done on other titles, The Vision, for example, and Omega Men, certainly. So it's a good middle of the road tone that Tom has struck with what he's done on Batman so far. I appreciate his appreciation of of Batman's rogues gallery, including some of the C or D list characters. He clearly has a fondness for Kite Man that I appreciate. He's kind of turned Kite Man into a running gag. He's like,
Kite Man.
Kite Man, hell yeah.
Wow.
He even brought back Colonel Blimp and Captain Stingery and people like that. He's established that Calendar Man has a superpower.
Okay. Wow. I've not been reading past the first arc, but oh wow.
Yeah. But yeah, he's throwing wrinkles like Gotham and Gotham Girl, who very nearly got nominated as my best new hero team of 2016. A couple of young people, a brother and sister, whose parents were rescued from a mugger by Batman. This saving them from having the same kind of origin Batman had, and who then grew up to be conscientious young people who wanted to make a difference to their city and go out and get expensive surgery that gives them near Superman-level superpowers, but then they end up coming home to Gotham to try and save it, and it just ends up destroying them. And then that's tied on the heels of that, and kind of spinning out from that, is the I Am Suicide arc, in which Batman recruits a team of Arkham inmates with the support of Amanda Waller, as sort of an unofficial suicide squad of his own, to invade Santa Prisca, home of Bane, to rescue Psycho Pirate from Bane. So this includes a fight scene between ventriloquist and Psycho Pirate.
Wow.
That's a matchup you never knew you wanted, but now you can't live without. And, along the way, he made a couple of controversial character choices. I mean, I was talking with our friend Matt at length about this at Chris's party the other night, actually, how the title of I Am Suicide refers to more than just the fact that Batman's putting together his own Suicide Squad. I think I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I know.
And he also does something a little controversial with Catwoman to make her feel like actually dangerous and unpredictable for the first time in what feels to me like a long time. But yeah, he's he's writing a Batman that really scratches itches for me. You know, it's an intelligent Batman. It's a Batman that does different things with the ongoing debate over the nature of Batman's identity. You know, is he really Bruce Wayne? Is Bruce Wayne the Mask? Is Batman the Mask? Who's really living the life here? He deals with that. He deals with the Rogues Gallery and of more members of the Rogues Gallery than most other writers are willing to touch. It's a version of the Bat that I'm actually kind of excited about reading, and so that I've chosen. Silver Surfer was actually pretty high on my list too, but I decided in the end to go with the Bat. As for the listeners now, their winner is actually, I think you'll approve of this, Chris, they went with Lazarus.
Oh.
So for another year, Lazarus appears on the ballot. Their second choice was also Silver Surfer. And their third choice, I was happy about this, Astro City.
Nice.
So still got its fans out there. Other things getting votes, Batman, Doctor Strange, of course, Paper Girls, Star Wars, naturally, The Vision, again, so just trying to break into every single category there is. Manifest Destiny, there was at least one vote for Archie, The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, The Black Monday Murders, there's that title again, it's something I think I'm going to have to try eventually. East of West, Captain America, Steve Rogers' Captain America, The Black Panther was in there a couple of times, Deadly Class, and plenty of others. But the final slate then consists of Star Wars, Silver Surfer, Batman, and Lazarus.
All right. Next up is Best Graphic Album, an original graphic novel or collection. And unfortunately, I really didn't get any graphic novels and didn't really get any collections, so I have to recuse myself once again from this category.
As is your right, sir.
My selection is Wonder Woman, The True Amazon by Jill Thompson.
All right. And my choice is something called Super Weird Heroes, Outrageous but Real.
All right. I just read this today because I came out in 2016. I got it when it came out, but I only got around to reading it today because I haven't read a lot of OGNs this year, and I wanted to have something for every category, and I've always loved Jill Thompson's work. And I was drawn to the fact that I'd read that this was a very different take on sort of the origin of Wonder Woman, and I was not disappointed. First of all, the artwork is simply stunning. It almost has like a watercolor feel to it, and she takes you through, you know, a lot of the elements of the Wonder Woman origin that you're familiar with, but the twist that I found that really captivated me was there's a very darker tone of this because the Diana we come to meet as she's growing up on Themyscira is a entitled, spoiled, completely self-centered brat, essentially. And the book is about how, because she's pampered by Hippolyta and the other Amazons, what that does to her as a person and how she ends – I won't spoil it, but how she ends up making a terrible mistake as a consequence of her attitude and demeanor based on the way she was raised, and how she has to come to terms with the ramifications of her tragic mistake, and how that eventually forges her into the being we know as Wonder Woman. It's told really in sort of the tone of like a fairy tale or a myth. So that there's epic stuff going on here. That there's fantastical creatures, but at the heart, that this is a story of deep pathos of a young woman who's basically been given everything, and how through her own missteps, that's all stripped away, and she has to basically build herself back up, through many years in order to achieve redemption. I think it's a perfect OGN. You don't need to know a lot about Wonder Woman to appreciate it. Jill Thompson, people know her work from things like The Sandman, for example, Scary Monsters, I believe. This is another magnificent piece of work on her part. I cannot – Scary Godmother, forgive me, not Scary Monsters, Scary Godmother. Right. It should still be out in stores. It only came out – I think it came out at the end of 2016. Beautiful hardcover edition. You can tell this is a labor of love for Jill Thompson. She wrote and drew this story. I'm assuming she colored it as well, because it looks like I mean, I could be wrong because I don't have a great eye for art. But if it's not watercolor, it's something that resembles it. it's beautiful. So this is a great example of what an OGN should be. It takes an established character but approaches it from a different perspective. Highest possible recommendation.
Well, perfect OGN. That's high praise indeed. Let's see. Okay, so for my choice of I don't buy a lot of OGNs or collections either, Brian. So this was another kind of tough one for me. But this is one that it was published this year. And
published 2016.
Well, okay, within the year of under discussion.
This year is 2017, just so you know. We're in 2017.
Right. It was published during the year we're discussing.
All
so
right.
that's not the year we're in, but
I'll go back to sleep.
Yeah, very good. I'll send your glass of water in a moment. Okay, so anyway, Super Weird Heroes, Outrageous But Real. And it's a product of the Yo Books imprint of IDW.
Oh, Craig Yo, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's okay.
That's the guy, yes.
That's the guy.
Yep, he's quite a comics historian, and he has an appreciation of the bizarre. And so Super Weird Heroes is a collection of almost exclusively, there are a couple of things more recently, but mostly Golden Age comics curiosities. It's a curated collection. I mean, there's a lengthy introductory essay by Mr. Yo, and there's a little essay in front of each of the 32 comic stories contained therein, each introducing the reader to a different bizarre Golden Age character. Handpicked by Yo, and it's not always the first appearance of those characters, but it's an exemplary story of that character to give you the gist of what he or she or they is about. And so there's a couple of somewhat well-known characters in there. Bullet Man from the old Fawcett comics. The Golden Age Catman and his sidekick Kitten, and the Green Turtle, who was the subject of Gene Luen Yang's Shadow Hero, a graphic novel a few years ago, credited with being the first Asian superhero to appear in American comics. And you've also got people like Madame Fatal, the vigilante in drag, a character that James Robinson has a fondness of and has used in the past. Siegel and Schuster's Funny Man is in there. The Deacon and his boy sidekick Mickey. Kismet, Man of Fate, thought to be the first Muslim superhero. Kangaroo Man, Zippo, the Wheeled Wonder, Phantasmo,
the list goes
Master of the World.
On and on.
Even the Hand, who is literally just a giant flying hand that fights crime. So it's Super Weird Heroes lives up to its name. Yeah. But yeah, it's a treasure trove of oddness, and it's apparently did well enough that there's already a second volume in the works, due out in 2017 sometime. I got this as a Christmas present, and I'm pretty sure I had burned through the whole thing by Epiphany. So it was a very enjoyable read for me. It collects a bunch of material that you don't find anywhere else. And when I try to come up with my nominees for this category every year, I try to take into account the presentation, the packaging, and how accessible the material would otherwise be without the collection. So that matters as much to me as the quality of the material they're in. And these are definitely comics that without the thought, care, and appreciation Craig Yo put into it would not have been made available to a contemporary audience, unless you go to Digital Comic Museum or something, I guess. But it's a handsome collection, big, fat hardcover thing, and I'm pleased to have it in my collection, and I will definitely be buying Volume 2 when it comes out this year. So, Super Weird Heroes, Outrageous But Real. The listeners nominated an original graphic novel. That was their favorite. It was written by Paul Dini, and it's entitled Dark Knight, N-I-G-H-T.
That's correct.
A true Batman story, and it tells the tale of how Paul survived a mugging attempt in the early 90s, and how, I guess, his love of Batman kind of helped him to pull through that experience. Now, that was the standalone first choice of the listeners. But since there is room on the slate for an extra, their second choice will also be entered, and that is March, Book 3.
Ah, yes.
Yes, tale of the civil rights and of the civil rights leader and later politician John Robert Lewis. It's an autobiographical series of graphic novels. And so Volume 3 got enough votes from the listeners to make it onto the ballot. So, for the best graphic album or collection, the nominees are Wonder Woman, The True Amazon, Super Weird Heroes, Outrageous But Real, Dark Knight, A True Batman Story, and March Book 3.
All right. Next up, Best Writer. I went with Mark Waid.
My selection is Jason Aaron.
And mine is Kieran Gillen.
Okay. Mark Waid has always been a favorite of mine. He will ever hold a place high in my esteem for his work on the Wally West Flash in the 90s. I could go on and on about that at length. But for 2016, I'm just so digging Archie. His work on that really has me jazzed for Archie now all of a sudden. Also, he wrote the Avengers .1, which I've started reading. Of course, Black Widow. And also from Aftershock Comics, Captain Kidd as well, which I've enjoyed as well. And he's one of the few writers where more times than not, his name in a book will get me to read it. Because in this day and age, try to finding things you want to look for. Oh, Mark Waid. Gotta give that a try. So, like with Archie, it's like, okay. And this guy is just a walking historian of comics, and to see him stretch his legs, so to speak, with Archie, it's really a treat. I'm really digging what he's doing with that. It's so many other things. So he gets my nominee, Mark Waid, for Best Writer of 2016.
Southern Bastards, Star Wars, Doctor Strange, The Goddamned. I don't think I need to say much more.
I feel like I got to be tolling the bell after each.
Yeah, this, and I'm probably forgetting something.
You said Jason
this
Aaron,
writer,
right?
What's that?
You said Jason Aaron, right?
I did.
How about the Mighty Thor?
The Mighty, Jesus, thank you. The Mighty Thor. Okay, I forgot something.
Wait, we forgot the vote. Okay.
His output at this point is so prodigious and so top flight. Each book I just described, and Pants, thank you for salvaging my shame there. Each title I mentioned is so different from the other books he's writing. He does them all so compelling, just so invigorating to read how well he grasps the characters he's dealing with, or his own concepts. Southern Bastards and The Goddamned are both his own creations with the artist he's working with, Jason Latour, and I think is it Pia Guerra in I forgot who's doing The Goddamned, forgive me. The guy can do it all. Like, he's tackling all these different genres. I mean, you're going from space fantasy to, the Earth before the time of the flood in Noah's Ark, and just brutality beyond comprehension, to the deep in the Marvel Universe with Jane Foster and Thor. His take on Doctor Strange is just thrilling. How he just turned that character completely on his head and stripped him of essentially all of his powers. He does great humor. His ability to convey just the horror of violence is second to none. Southern Bastards is one of the top titles in comics right now. I mean, when I think of books like Lazarus, Saga, Southern Bastards, they're in a class by themselves, essentially. And this writer, I've loved his work since I read The Other Side several years ago, his fantastic Vietnam story. Then, of course, Scalp, one of the all-time great Vertigo titles. He just keeps knocking it out of the park, one after another. Without question, one of the best writers working in the medium today. And that's all I have to say about Jason Aaron.
The Goddamned, the artist is R.M. Guerra.
R.M. Guerra,
yeah.
Okay, thank
Pia
you.
Guerra, of course, is Why the Last Man.
And R.M. Guerra worked with him on Scalped.
Okay.
So, if I remember correctly.
Right. I probably would have gone with Tom King, but I thought I'd step aside and let the listeners have that one, and which they do. Spoilers. But yeah. So Kieran Gillen he's a writer whose output I have enjoyed for several years in a row now. But he just happened to bubble up to the surface at this juncture. I just sort of wanted to throw a little bit of a recognition in the direction of the excellent Darth Vader series, which hinted at earlier when he mentioned it in conjunction with the Star Wars series with which it crossed over during the Vader Down story. But yeah, that series, it's an excellent supporting cast of the two kill droids, 000 and BT, and also Dr. Aphra, who has begun her own spin-off ongoing series, also written by Kieran Gillen, which can be slipped into consideration for this year's Best of Awards because it was published in December of 2016, Dr. Aphra #1. Kieran Gillen is also the writer of The Wicked and the Divine, which is a series that I've been following since it began, and which is also very good. And He's a couple of things he's been doing over at Avatar as well. Haven't mentioned it yet on the podcast, either tonight or at any other point this year, but I've been reading the anthology series they've been doing called Cinema Purgatorio, which is a monthly, like, extra-sized anthology of like horror and fantasy type stories. It's got Alan Moore content in every issue. It's got that that Garth Ennis written Code Prue series. That we did the first issue of that as an off the rack. So that's been folded into that anthology. And Kieran Gillen has a bizarre little feature in there called Modded. The premise of which I'm not even going to try to explain here, but it involves demons and fairies and master and familiar relationships. It's magic stuff, but it's kind of hard-boiled magic.
Okay.
Very, very, very offbeat. So yeah, I'm giving the nod to Kieran Gillen.
All right.
Long story short. And as for the listeners, it was actually a tie for them. Pretty close horse race. Two people amassing a high number of votes, and the same number of votes. One of those two people was Jason Aaron, for all the reasons, exhaustively and eloquently stated by Chris, and the other one was Tom King. So Tom King will stand as the listener's nominee. So, best writer, your choices are Jason Aaron, Mark Waid, Kieran Gillen, and Tom King.
And, of course, Tom King, Batman, Sheriff of Babylon, The Vision, was Omega Men.
Yes, that did end this year,
Okay.
so that counts.
All right, next up is Best Artist. My nominee, Bilquis Evely from Sugar and Spike.
Mm-hmm.
My nominee is Sean Phillips from Kill or Be Killed.
And mine is Mikhail Khanin from Batman and also Nightwing.
All right, yes. When I already mentioned all about Sugar and Spike, but what also really drew me, no pun intended, drew me into that story was the fantastic artwork from Bilquis, and who has been around for a little while, who I just never heard of before. And just her drawing are just so... Just read the book and look at the book. It's just the detail, the facial expressions are everything. And yeah, for just a mini... Because there's so many great artists out there. I'm thinking, there's some really great stuff out there. But this just... It knocked me out. It jumped out at me. So, whoa, I got to give her the nomination for Best Artist for 2016. And so I did.
You sure did.
And that's what I'm saying about that.
I've loved Sean Phillips' work since I first was introduced to him in the book Sleeper from, I think it was Wildstorm, but DC Wildstorm, which he did with his partner Ed Brubaker. And every book they've done since, Criminal, Fatale, Incognito, The Magnificent, oh God, I can't believe this brain farted. The Hollywood Mystery one. Pants, could you look it up for me? I'm dying here.
The Fade Out?
The Fade Out, thank you. And, of course, now Kill or Be Killed. I'm just in awe of this guy's work. I mean, you talk about noir, and in order to capture the feel of noir in terms of the atmosphere, the use of shadow and mood, no one does it better in comics, as far as I'm concerned, than Sean Phillips. And his work on Kill or Be Killed, because this is such, as we mentioned earlier, this deconstruction of the sort of the vigilante motif. And, a lot of the story takes place in the wintertime, so how he captures snow and the contrast between light and dark as the character moves through the bowels of New York City and he embarks on this pursuit, so to speak, as a vigilante, and just the expression of the people he encounters and the violence. I think he's one of the best artists in comics, period. And I think his work on Kill or Be Killed is some of his strongest work yet, which is saying something. But if you want to see a master at the top of his form, and especially a master who can capture a certain feel in comics, I think like nobody else can, it's Sean Phillips. And every title I've just listed, by the way, is great. I think everything that these two creators have done together is top tier. And I also want to comment on the fact that all of their books have generous letters pages and essays in the back. You get no better bang from your book than when you buy a comic produced by Brubaker and Phillips. Enough said.
All right. I'll begin by saying that I was very close to giving my nomination for Best Artist to Mike Mayhew, actually, because there were a couple of issues of the Star Wars ongoing series this year, which were flashback stories to Obi-Wan Kenobi's days on Tatooine before the events of the first Star Wars movie, and the artwork there was absolutely sumptuous. And but the main reason Mikhail Hanin beat him out for my nomination is simply because Hanin has a larger body of work in the course of this year, whereas Mayhew, as far as I know, he just did those 2 issues. So anyway, Mikhail Hanin, he drew an arc or 2 of the Tom King Batman series for DC Rebirth, and he also had been the artist on Grayson. I said Nightwing a few minutes ago. I'm sorry, I meant to say Grayson. Mm-hmm. I've liked his stuff since he was on Justice League Dark a few years ago. It's crisp and detailed, and I don't think I have anything more to say about it, honestly.
Okay.
This is when my vocabulary runs out, when I have to...
Oh, now it runs out!
Yeah. When I have to talk about art. So, anyway, I put him on the ballot, and there he sits. Now, to the listeners, for their part, we have another 3-way tie. So, we will again have 6 nominees. The 3 laurel bearers here are Phil Jimenez, Gabriel Hernandez Walta of The Vision, and Mike Allred. So
Good choices all around.
Choices.
There those are. Let's see. So let's run down a couple of other things the listeners thought were worthy of nominating. A couple of other people they thought were worthy of nominating. Ed McGuinness, Gabriel Ba, Frank Cho, Sana Takeda, Jason Fabach got a couple, Dan Mora, Babs Tarr, Fiona Staples, Michael Lark, Carlos Pacheco, Chris Somney, Jerome Pena, Mateo Scalera, Ryan Stegman, Henry Flint. Yeah, it kind of went all over the place. Yeah, Brian Stelfreeze is in there. And I didn't...
His work on Black Panther was tremendous.
Oh, yes. It's just wonderful design and layout work that he did there. And I didn't mention other writers that the listeners thought were worthy. Let's see, Rick Remender, Max Landis, Brian K. Vaughan, the saga heads are still out there. Mark Miller, Greg Rucka, he was like the 3rd place vote getter after the 2 that actually did get onto the ballot. Brian Wood, Charles Soule, Jerry Duggan, Dan Slott, Kieran Gillen did get 1 or 2, John Wagner, David F. Walker, Jeff Lemire, and multiple others. So the final ballot there for Best Artist of 2016 will be Sean Phillips, Bilkis Eveli, Mikhail Hanin, Michael Allred, Phil Jimenez, and Gabriel Hernandez Walta.
All right. The next category is Best Writer-Artist, someone who does both. My nominee, who else could it be but Terry Moore?
My nominee is Matt Wagner.
Mine is Eric Powell.
All right. Yes, Terry Moore for 2016 had both Rachel Rising, that series, end, and started up later on in the year with Motor Girl. My God. I mean, again, we've gone on and on the show about his he's just a master illustrator, storyteller, cartoonist, whatever you have. But he can certainly write the crap out of these things, too. Oh, my God. This Rachel Rising with its just horror-chilling storyline going into Motor Girl, which is something completely different, but has some similar things going on. I can't think of, again, this is always near the top of my pile, anything from Terry Moore, and I mentioned before, these books smell great. But, and I said, I recently just became in possession of my first original art page by Terry Moore from Motor Girl, issue 3, page 4. I was just so motivated by his work that I got to get something from him. So he's my nominee for Best Writer Artist of 2016.
All right, I mentioned before my love for Matt Wagner's work ever since I was first introduced to Grendel and Mage many years ago. He's yet to disappoint me. And again, this goes back to my nominee of The Shadow, the Death of Margot Lane. There are very few creators in my reading experience who handle the writing and the drawing so well in terms of synthesizing that. Terry Moore, of course, is a great selection. Both your selections are excellent, by the way, gentlemen. I mean, Terry Moore is a living master. But Matt Wagner I consider a living master as well. And again, just the way he's taken the Shadow concept and basically single-handedly breathed new life into it. Shadow Year One, which he wrote, did not draw. Shadow versus Grendel, which he wrote and drew, and now Shadow: The Death of Margot Lane. We should. I don't think we should forget comics pulp origins and how many of the great concepts of characters we love came out of the world of pulps. And Wagner lovingly pays tribute to that with the work he's done on The Shadow, and I continue to see that great reverence in the work he did on The Death of Margot Lane. So, once my nominee for Best Writer Artist of the Year, and also I think one of the all-time great writer artists in comics, certainly in the past decades. So, Matt Wagner.
And I looked in Eric Powell's direction for a bit of small press representation, I think. He's mainly based on his self-published Hillbilly series, which he puts out through his own Albatross Funny Books company. And Hillbilly, I'd call it like an Appalachian Gothic horror humor adventure series about a wandering blind adventurer named Roundel as he wanders throughout the Ozarks, encountering and defeating various evils with their roots in folklore of the region. And it's fairly funny stuff. I mean, it's always fairly tongue-in-cheek where Eric Powell is concerned. If you've read his series The Goon, it's much like that, but a couple of shades darker, maybe a tiny bit more serious. And it's got more of a sort of a folktale or legend and lore kind of flavor to it. And it's got lots of atmosphere. You really feel the wilderness, the trees and the mountains and the swamp in his wonderful line drawings. And it's got a giant talking saber-toothed bear as a sidekick. So her name is Lucille. So yes, that is a series that I've been buying and liking. It, too, is falling a little behind schedule. It seems to be a tragic trend with some of my favorite series of this year. Silver Surfer, Astro City, and now Hillbilly. But it's worthy work, and so I decided that Eric Powell would get my nomination in this category for it. The listeners have elected Jeff Lemire. That is their choice.
Great choice.
In the writer and artist category. Their second choice was Terry Moore. And number 3 for Ragnarok, coming out from IDW, Walt Simonson.
Ah, yes.
Oh, nice.
And some other people who got some votes. Mike Mignola, still in there, doing his Hellboy-related stuff for Dark Horse. Jim Starlin got a couple of nominees for Thanos, the Infinity Finale. Frank Cho. John Byrne got one. Gilbert Hernandez got one. Francis Manipul, Scotty Young for I Hate Fairyland, our friend Steve Bryant, Joelle Jones, and that about covers it. But the official nominees then are Matt Wagner, Terry Moore, Eric Powell, and Jeff Lemire for Best Writer-Artist of the Year.
All right, the next category is Best Color Artist, and again, I'm sorry, I must recuse myself because I could not come up with a color artist.
Quite all right, oh man.
My choice is Jordi Belair.
And mine is Jason Wright.
All right, Jordi Belair, her work on The Vision, so utterly stunning. Again, I'm not at all anywhere near an art critic, so I can't, like Murd, I can't speak to this kind of topic the way I would like to. It's kind of out of my wheelhouse, but all I'll say is that The Vision is such, The Vision is a very colorful character just in terms of his costume, his visage, the way he appears, and she did a wonderful job capturing that, but also contrasting that with, that they're living in kind of like this sort of like mundane suburban existence. So I think she did a wonderful job reminding us of the world the Vision was trying to live in. So a lot of the colors are kind of muted in the story, which I thought worked very well because we're dealing with someone who's trying to kind of fit in, not trying to be flashy and over the top in how they appear and how they conduct themselves. And I thought that was a really wonderful balance that she captured there in the colors for the Vision.
I haven't got an awful lot to say about my own choice here either. Jason Wright did do the coloring for various Green Lantern series for DC over the course of 2016, which is always – it's kind of like my default option. If when in doubt, look to the lanterns when it comes to the best colorist of a year. But what first drew my eye to his work, though, is actually the fact that he was the colorist for the Secret Six series.
Ah.
Yes, I wanted to, since it lost my nomination for Best Cliffhanger Moment, I wanted to give it something, and really, his colors over Dale Egglesham's pencils, I mean, it radiates a sort of warmth and humanity that it imparts a sense of family that Gail Simone is trying to build around this team of criminals, murderers, and monsters. So Jason Wright really did contribute something valuable to the visual dimension of that series, which I know we enjoyed. And so that plus the lantern stuff adds up to him getting my nomination. As for the listeners, far and away the favorite was once again Jordie Bellaire. But their second choice, also with a very strong showing, nearly as many votes as Ms. Bellaire, is Matt Wilson, who has done colors for a bunch of stuff. I think he was the colorist on The Mighty Thor. I know him best as the colorist for The Wicked and The Divine. But he is going to be on the ballot for the listeners. And also, because we need to have a fourth, the third place vote getter for the listeners was Laura Allred. So,
Great choice.
And those are the only people who got multiple nominations, actually. So I won't bother to read down the rest. But the nominees for Best Color Artist are then Jordie Bellaire, Jason Wright, Matt Wilson, and Laura Allred. Okay.
Next up is the penultimate category. I love that word. For Best Letter, my nominee is Terry Moore.
Jason Arthur from Wonder Woman, The True Amazon.
Dave Lanphier from various Valiant projects.
Okay. Yeah, Terry Moore, of course, does everything on his books, his own lettering, but reading the Rachel Rising with some of those crazy scenes, and when some of the characters just go nuts and start screaming or speaking in tongues, just you can feel the power come out of his lettering here. And, I just can't, and this is a category which also it's generally sometimes tough to find nominees for myself.
Understood.
But rereading some of these things and looking at it, it's like, it's got to be Terry Moore. This really is good stuff. I mean, honest to God, some of that stuff from Rachel Rising, it's wonderful. So he gets my nomination for Best Letterer.
What I loved about Jason, and I'm not familiar with his work besides this book, but what floored me about it was he uses a very stylistic approach in that the lettering appears in the form of like parchment, as the origin of, or Jill Thompson's version of the origin of Wonder Woman is conveyed to the reader, and the lettering has this very elegant sort of fairy tale feel to it. It works so perfectly with the feel that Thompson creates in her narrative and the artwork. I just think it's a perfect synthesis of the visual and the narrative in terms of the writing, syncing up with the art. And he just did a wonderful job here, just maintaining and intensifying the feel that I think Thompson was trying to create with the story she was telling. So highest marks here for his lettering on this OGN.
You said his name was Jason Arthur, Chris?
Yes.
All right. Got it recorded here on the register. Dave Lanphier's lettering, it first came to my attention when we did 4000 AD, that summer miniseries event that Valiant did. We did that as an off-the-rack.
Right.
And it was just big, bold, blocky, and it was very well suited for the kind of hyperbolic future science fiction story that they were trying to do, a larger-than-life thing about this giant outer space city that can also turn into a giant dragon. And so the big lettering helped to contribute to the scope of the story, the scale on which events were happening. And he also was fairly prolific at Valiant this year on other series. But the one thing that most won me over to his side as far as nominating him for Best Letter of the Year was the fact that he was responsible for all that typographical jazz that went on in Future Quest.
Ah.
Yeah. We're talking about a series that has a bunch of classic TV cartoon characters coming together in a semi-modern atmosphere. He's trying to blend a whole lot of different tones and a whole lot of different sources for character materials, and then making them all work together in a single story. And so it's all the different artists, whether a penciler, inker, colorist, or what have you, needed to work together to make this, to create the shared context that was the Future Quest series. And so the lettering, it was a pretty important graphic dimension of all that. So I decided Dave Lanphier, for having helped to accomplish that, ought to get the nomination for me. The listeners, meanwhile, have gifted us with another three-way tie. So this is going to be another slate of 6 nominees this time out. And those 3 gentlemen are Joe Caramagna, Russ Wooten, and the perennial favorite Todd Klein.
Yes.
So
yes.
Those 3 are going straight on the ballot, along with Jason Arthur, Terry Moore, and Dave Lanphier.
All right. And the last category, but certainly not least, Breakthrough Talent of 2016. My nominees are Julie Benson and Shauna Benson, the writing team for Batgirl and the Birds of Prey.
My nominee is David Walker.
And my nominee is going to be Jody Houser.
All right. Well, it was actually 1 year ago today, as we record this episode, that I actually got to meet Julie and Shauna in person out in Los Angeles. And I could just tell right away, they're just longtime comic fans. They've been in the TV business for quite a while, doing writing. And I'm so happy in this past year to see all the success they've gotten from Back on the Birds of Prey. Because that was a big big shoes to fill, coming off of, like Chuck Dixon and Gail Simone's runs, which are iconic. People always think about, and they always try to refer back to that. And so they had quite a job ahead of them, and they rose to the job.
Absolutely.
Just absolutely wonderful. The Who is Oracle storyline was great. Now, it didn't end in 2016, so I really couldn't nominate that. But I want to give them a nomination somehow. And, yes, just getting to know them a little bit outside of the show, I could just tell that they were so enthused about their work, and it just showed in when it came out. So they got my nomination for Breakthrough Talent of 2016.
All right. I chose David Walker for a couple reasons. One, as many listeners know, I'm a huge fan of the John Shaft character from the classic blaxploitation films and novels. And Walker's done 2 wonderful miniseries perfectly capturing the essence of that character. One of those miniseries came out this past year. He also wrote a wonderful new novel about Shaft, which is also fantastic. He co-wrote the wonderful Tarzan, the Planet of the Apes miniseries, which was extremely entertaining and really lovingly touched upon the histories of both those franchises, or properties, I should say. But most importantly, working with the great Sanford Green, who's a longtime listener and booster of the show, he rejuvenated lovingly the Power Man and Iron Fist team. He captured the history of those characters, their dynamic, their partnership, but brought them very much into the present day without in any way eschewing their classic 1970s Bronze Age history, right down to all the goofy villains, many of which he's brought back in various incarnations. You can't tell a good Power Man story without that sense of comradeship, brotherhood, and also sort of wackiness. It's all there in this series. It is easily one of Marvel's top titles. And for that book alone, along with the other books I've mentioned, he is my breakthrough talent for 2016. Anything this guy writes going forward, I'm going to read. I don't care if it's his grocery list. I'm going to give it a shot. David Walker, breakthrough talent.
All right. And, Jody Houser, she is the writer of the breakaway hit for Valiant Faith. And that's just been a tremendous success for her. And she's been breaking through from there into writing for a couple of other companies. She's got a couple of DC Comics Justice League-related one-shots that she's put out. And she's got a young animal series called Mother Panic that just debuted late this past year. And she's popped up a couple of other places in the Valiant universe as well, in addition to writing Faith, which was a very successful miniseries that spawned an ongoing series. So, congratulations to her. I give her my nomination because, well, actually the Bensons were pretty close to the top of my list, too, but I figured you would probably want to do the honors.
Yes.
And but yeah, I certainly echo what you say about the Bensons. It's not the easiest business to break into, but they've made their way in flying colors. Like you said, they have big shoes to fill on writing The Birds of Prey, but they've done excellent work with that too. That Oracle story was great, and I came pretty close to nominating their snake triad of characters, which is a great foil for the Birds as best villain. So, yes, major ups to Julie and Shauna, who have been friends of the show and friends of ours, and I'm glad that they're getting some love from the industry and from us.
Yes.
And not only from us, but from the listeners, because the listeners actually nominated the Bensons.
Oh,
they were their
excellent.
number one pick.
Excellent.
Everybody's trying to be the Bensons' baby now. But yes, they were the listener's choice. So we must now go to the listener's second choice. And that is a two-way tie. So we're going to have two people on here, of a slate of 5 for this category. Mark Russell, who is the artist on The Flintstones.
Oh, okay.
So apparently this is an example of a series that maybe we ought to take a closer look at.
Yeah. One I probably dismissed out of hand.
Yeah, I didn't really check it out either, but I'd be more likely to try that than, say, Wacky Raceland, which has already been canceled, so I think we made the right choice ignoring that one. But tied with Mark Russell for second choice for the listeners for Breakthrough Talent of 2016 for the third consecutive year, Tom King.
I was hoping that wouldn't happen.
Back on the ballot again.
Oh.
So there that is.
Come on. Really? Can we make it a choice and just cut him off the ballot for this category, for God's sake?
We ought to impose a term limit or something.
I mean, how many times can you break through? Seriously.
Finding more and more ceilings, I suppose. Well, let's see. Some other people that were nominated by the listeners. Chelsea Kane, Marguerite Bennett, Dan Mora, I think was the artist on Klaus, Max Lendis, Nick Darrington, David F. Walker, there you go. Gabriel Hernandez Walta of The Vision, Jorge Jimenez, Jerry Duggan, Simon Oliver, Mariano Laclaustra, Marjorie Liu, and Magdalene Visaggio and Brittany Williams are some examples. But the final ballot for this category consists of David F. Walker, Julie and Shauna Benson, Jody Hauser, Mark Russell, and Tom King.
Now, please put it on the ballot as Julie Benson and Shauna Benson because they're not a couple. I know Julie hates that when you put just the first name.
I'll take that under advisement.
All right, so that's our 2016 nominees. Now for the details on how you can vote, and just I give you the floor again, sir.
Well, the process is actually fairly similar to the nominations process. So the first thing you need to do is come to thecomicforums.vanillaforums.com, where you will find a complete slate of nominees posted for your convenience. Then, once you've looked them over and made your selections, you can type out your vote in each category. Please vote in at least 12 of the 16 categories. Otherwise, your ballot will be considered incomplete and will be discarded. And once you've got that all typed out, you may email it to bestof@comicgeekspeak.com. Please get it into us before 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Monday, February 27th. That will be the deadline.
Which, as this episode goes online, should be about 2 weeks worth.
Right. So it's a little less time than you had to come up with your nominees, but it requires a little less thought and effort.
Right.
And please only vote for one person, comic, or thing in each category. No ties. That's right out.
Please, no ties. Oh my God. We have to go to a tiebreaker, and it's 1, 2, 3. It's
a Rochambeau,
yeah. All right. Well, that was a nice long episode, and thank you, Chris, for being able to stay with us for the whole time with only one pee break.
You bet, brothers. I do have to flee shortly because I have to micturate again. But.
Yeah, exactly. As do I. Any last minute business before we scoot on out of here?
Well, I want to give my copious and sincere thanks to all the listeners who
Oh, my
participated
God,
in
yes.
this year's
Thank you
nominations
so much.
process. Thank you, all of you, for sharing your opinions. Thank you to those of you who submitted complete ballots, where possible, because that's... did you ever know that you're my hero? Because that does make this so much easier when... it's not required, but I appreciate it when people nominate something in each category.
Yes.
And to those of you who went that extra mile and not only listed a nominee for each category, but also a little like editorial sentence or in some cases paragraph, like supporting your choice, I actually personally very much appreciate that too, because it makes it that much more interesting for me as I go through all of these emails and collate the results, just to have a little something original to read instead of just looking at lists of names.
Yes.
So thank you for those of you who went above and beyond the call and shared your thoughts.
And thanks to Murd for being the tip of the spear on this as well.
It really is my pleasure, Chris.
Well, we appreciate it, brother.
It's kind of fun.
All right. Well, that'll wrap it up. And once again, this episode was brought to you by superherostuff.com. You go to for all of your superhero stuff.
Superhero stuff.
Super.
All right.
All right, let's play ourselves out of here.
Let's play ourselves out of this.
If you'd like to send us an email, our address is comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. Not to be confused with bestof@comicgeekspeak.com, where you must send your ballots once you've gone to...
You don't have to, but you may.
Well, yeah, it's the best place to send them.
But it's not required.
Yeah.
You said must.
It's a must. And go to thecomicforums.vanillaforums.com to find the lists of nominees so you know for whom you'll be voting. If you
didn't make them listen, you're going along with this episode.
Yeah, and we don't blame you if you didn't. If you'd like to send us a voicemail, you can call 267-702-6642. You can like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. We're at Comic Geek Speak. While you're at thecomicforums.vanillaforums.com checking out the list of nominees, why not stick around and leave some feedback on some of our various podcast episodes and participate in some comics-related discussions with fellow CGS listeners and
Yeah, I
fans.
see you've got a lot of new people in the forums because of the voting process here.
I certainly hope so. And we'd like to thank everyone who's donated to the show. We really appreciate it. Couldn't continue to do the show without you. And as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time.